Hi everybody, this is Bruce with habowskistudio, and I think I'm going to do a couple videos, starting with this one, see how it goes, revisiting paintings I did earlier this summer, because really what I do when I go out in plein air, eventually yes, I'd like to just finish it up and be done, but I like to study it when I get back, and maybe there's parts when I'm painting at that moment that I know if I go any further it's just going to get it more muddy. I have some good bones, so that's what's going on. This is the stack from summer, and I'm not going to do every video on these obviously, but I just thought I'd try it out, and I got this set of plastic putty knives that I might incorporate, try to do, and of course regular palette knives. I'm going to, with the field, try to get more activity going on, and especially maybe some palette knife in the trees to suggest leaves. So it's practice time and experiment time, and because if the putty knife thing works out well, I could see using these in some of my urban paintings for different effects, to really get the paint on there and in a different way rather than just a brush. So we're going to get started and see what happens. Palette today is ivory black, titanium white, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, and cad red light. I did a video on this, and obviously the palette might be a little different at that time, but this is what I'm using today to bring it to life. I'm really hoping to get some rim lighting going on with a little more intensity. So let's get to it. Okay, here we go. See what happens. It should be fun, and I like the idea too that sometimes you have some educated guess what effect you're going to get, but palette knife work, you really don't have the finesse, and it can be challenging sometimes. So anyway, let's get painting here. Kind of just slapping it on, or trying to. It's not super thick enough. You just get effects with the palette knife that, man, you can't get with the brush. And been watching some videos on YouTube on John Thornton's channel. He does Philadelphia artists. He does a lot of videos on them and some of the paintings that these artists do with just the paint surface is just very interesting. And I want to kind of get some more of that going on in my own work. So let's work on that. And already it's just glancing on it's pretty interesting. So now mix a little more white. Now if you don't like it, you can scrape down and try to get that tone you want. I mean, it's really going to be, and I will incorporate some brush work at certain points, but like the hill, I'm going to try to cut in around that and see what happens. You notice I'm not using too small a palette knife in relation to the size of the work. Just going to see where it takes me. That's all I'm looking to do right now. And it may be a total disaster, but it's really not a disaster, because even if it doesn't turn out great, I don't say that I'm learning for the next painting. So that's, in some ways, that's why I paint on panel a lot, because number one, I like the surface, but it's very inexpensive to, I mean, I can buy a sheet of this stuff and cut it up and have a million panels for, so there's no, sometimes we as artists, we don't make, it's hard to make some money, and so trying to get some things going supply-wise, we can't always afford the best, or, canvas is interesting to work on, but, then if you mess up, yes, you can paint over it, but sometimes you don't want that underlayer showing, or even if you wiped it down, now you got a tone you got to deal with. So anyway, panels, just throw them out. Who cares? So I'm just moving paint around until I get an effect that reminds me. Of course, I'm doing all this based off memory of that moment. Sometimes that's what's cool about plein air painting, is it's almost like you're going right back in time, because you've spent time with your subject you've studied it, you've looked at it intently, and then you find you can get like the flavor of the place. And yes, it looks like it, you know, certain shapes maybe, detail-wise, it may not be exact, but the feeling. It's like, how do you combine technical, you know, information with feeling, you know, and that sort of thing. So I'm really liking the sky. This is right off the bat. And what's great about this too is, you know, cleaning a brush, you got to dip it in turpentine, and then if you don't really dry it out very well, it can affect the thickness of the paint. It can get a little too thin. So with a palette knife, you can just wipe off what you don't like. It's beautiful stuff. Like right now. Wiped off the excess. Now I can move what I put down. And I think this palette's going to work out pretty good. Now, I'm anticipating with the yellow ochre, using yellow ochre instead of cad yellow or something like that, that the rim lighting might not be as bright as I might like it. But again, like the pumpkin painting I just did, it's all relative to what's around it. So we're going to see what happens. Now I got a little yellow ochre with some white paint and a little bit of just trying to grains of something in there. And if it's a little too yellow, which it is, you just wipe it out. It's that easy. Just have fun. Move it around. And look at it when you do it, when you put it on there. Don't just keep smearing around till, you know, you want to study it as you're putting it on. Now, I'm going to leave that until I get other parts of the painting brought up, because then I can flush it out, or it may, when I get more textures in the foreground, it may help connect the foreground to the background. Okay, now got the sky in a little bit. I'm going to take my little, I'm going to try to see what happens when I play with this thing. Now, of course, over time, this edge may wear down, and yeah, you can probably put some sandpaper to it, but I figured for $3 for a 3-pack at Home Depot, give it a shot before I commit to, yes, I like this technique, then I'll go out and buy some flexible metal ones. And I'd probably buy them from Home Depot rather than art supply store, because their art supply store, obviously, is, you're in a specialty place, might cost more. I don't know. I'm assuming. Okay, I'm going to get going. And sometimes, depending how much paint you're picking up with these, don't just, you know, you might want to look what kind of paint you're taking off, because you might be able to save that as a mud pile by scraping any with a palette knife and putting it back on the palette. So yeah, you're going to waste some paint, but if you happen to work in a palette that is earth tones or something like that, the paint is relatively inexpensive. So naturally going to use more paint with these techniques here, but that's how you can really manipulate the paint then. And see, I may leave some of the previous layer. Better to put down, almost like cooking, you know, you just add a little bit, taste it. In this sense, I'm tasting the previous layers and painting around them a bit. give it just some dimension. And if I don't like it, I'll add more paint. It's that simple. And I'm mixing, I'm experimenting with mixing on the palette. And getting what I call a loose mix. So I don't mix the heck out of it with a palette knife on the palette, and see what that does. And you can see probably, I don't know, that's quite a bit of paint there, but we'll get to that in a moment. And I'm holding it more up and down. Sometimes you can do this to take paint off, but like right now I want to get some of that, move it over here, trying to keep a balance and trying to keep smaller strokes like this and then bigger ones as I do more kind of like this. And I'm turning just to, hey, what's it do, you know? I have no idea. I've actually never done this much, especially with the putty knife. And you can even then drag back through it, create some interest, break up the mechanical lines that this creates. Come over here to pick up some of that color. And you see I'm just moving the paint around. Kind of interesting. And I can even take the corner, and I don't know if you can see this line. So as I get into deeper tones in the foreground, that might be useful for suggesting grasses and such. So you can see already how it has more power. The painting already, I'm not even close to being done yet, but already it's taken on a new life. I'm loving it, loving it. See how interesting that is? Okay. Oh, now, a little yellow ochre. See what we get for brightness. In between the other tones, bring some back there a little bit, not too much. There we go. Nice activity, I'm liking it. Okay, now let's get some more green, darker green for the foreground. Use a little bit of yellow ochre and black, ivory black. A little bit of blue. See what happens. Get these out of the way here. Kind of in the way. Actually, can't go vertical enough. Just prop up the painting more. There we go. I'll check my film, make sure I'm not out of frame. Okay, good thing I checked that, because obviously I don't want to be doing this whole video with having you missing half of it. Alright, like I was saying, give yourself room to drag this down. I don't like the idea. See how, if I can have it too, show you an example. Getting a little bit of particles from, I guess, some leftover paint. Got to be careful then. Your palette gets in the way. So, show you the. Now, if you have it too dark, too much of a dark patch, don't forget your underlayer is dry. So you can just change it. See, pull off some paint, maybe scrape some paint, barely applying any pressure. Now the lines, maybe if you want to create some grass as an example, obliterate it again until you get a feeling of the grasses. Now of course if you were trying to mimic something, I mean you can, certain elements in a landscape doesn't take much to suggest that species or something like that, but if you were trying to get exact, like a botanist with the grasses, just pull out subtle details that suggest the greater whole. Don't have to introducing a little cad red light, just to get some warmth in the foreground. And I may get the bigger batches in with the putty knife here, and then take a smaller palette knife and manipulate. So I'm not going to go too crazy here. Kind of liking how you're getting the dark foreground and it goes to maybe just a bit of the warmth back in here, just touch. Okay. Liking it, liking it. Now I'm taking some straight, a little ochre, and I can just I think part of it's going to be not having too much on there. If you think you're getting some areas too built up, you can wipe down and start over. I'm dancing the brush around, the putty knife. Wiping off, applying pressure to pull back a little bit of this paint. There, okay. Now I'm putting the palette knife down and the putty knife and getting a smaller, matter of fact, give me a second. Okay, now let's get some trees going on here. Now what I'm going to do first is do the rim lighting with a brush to get that. I want to have a comparison. I want to have, because that's part of the effect I wanted originally. So, but actually first I'm gonna work on a little bit on the distant hill to integrate it with the sky a little bit before I start doing my rim lighting. So. See what we got here for a tone. Way too dark. The pile I mixed up on my palette and found out it was too dark. I'm mixing up a new palette next to that one so I can see the value shift a little bit and take a better guess at what level and put it next to. Okay, that's good enough because I can scrape off some of the darker. Get back in here. And the edges that where the sky meets that hill, what I can do a little bit later, once I get this all going, is I can finesse the edges with a dry brush and really integrate so I don't have, if I don't want a hard edge, I can control it. Okay, now I'm going to introduce into that value of the darker value of the blue that I had before, a little yellow ochre, to start coming forward in the distant trees here. And yes, I think, you know, it might, depending on the subject matter, this would be something to do out in the field. But you can see how it takes a little time with the palette knife action to really manipulate what you're doing. So time-wise out in the field, you can see how it might be an issue of depending on the size you're doing. So I'm going to lighten up that background just a little bit. Wiping my palette because it's mixing with the green a little bit. Might even just mix it with ultramarine blue and white and lighten it to get some chromatic, enhance the distant look. See what happens. Try to give it a sense of wiped off my palette knife. Don't mush around too much unless you can be very careful. Go back in a little bit of this darker green, pull it back in to temper that edge. Maybe a little bit of yellow ochre in there. White. So, like I said before, we can manipulate later with the brush. Now, I'm going to work on mixing up some color for the rim lighting. Okay, this is how we learn. As I expected, that's just not going to be very bright. I'm going to put it on a few trees. Obviously, I think I'll do that because not every tree is going to be lit the same. They're different species and different color blue greens, warm greens. But I'm really going to focus some stronger light, and I am going to have to introduce cad yellow to achieve that. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on this focal point being the strongest highlights on the trees, and all these other trees are going to be varying shades of green for different types of trees, just to have a little variety. Not too crazy because I don't want the greens too far apart over here because then it'll just be too busy. Like I'm going to group some of this together because it's, I think, a little too busy. So what I might do is I'm definitely going to take this out here. That's too much. So this part I'm going to time lapse a little bit because it's just a matter of reblocking in some dark values here with some cool greens and shadow, and then highlighting, rim lighting the trees. So we'll get to that, and you can watch that for a few minutes, and then we'll get back to some detail painting. Okay, now I've got some base tones in for the darks of the trees. Now I'm going to finesse that a little bit and just adjust this a bit. Excuse me, some of the dangers of the studio lighting. It's reflecting just a bit. Let me try to fix that a little, see if I can. Alright, now I'm going to adjust some of the color within certain shapes to to bring out a few of the trees. And I have mixtures of the ultramarine blue, cad yellow, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, ivory black, yellow ochre, and so on to give me a variety of greens. And since I've already got the dark on there, I'm just going to try to get some variety in the paint here. And once I get these darks set, then I can go in while the paint's wet. And right in here, of course, we still got a little wet. I don't want to disturb that too much. And I may dance around with some colors that I have on a palette to put them in different places. Just to have some connection to other parts. And some of this stuff's going to be subtle, and I can always push it. Again, I don't want too much activity going on over here, just enough to suggest, okay, those are a bunch of trees, and I want to stay over here. And sometimes in the past I've had issues with that, because of course your mind says, well, I can see that, I want to paint that. And we forget that painting is kind of like movies. You're going to have the star of the movie, and then all these people are extras. People, the trees. But that idea is to be careful, not get carried away, focusing too much on the non-important essentials there. So, and I'm going to try to keep these as dark as possible without looking like cutouts, so that this brightness really sings. And get a little blue on there. So I'm adding just subtle varieties, especially as it gets to the top where the rim lighting is going to be, so that there's not as strong. I mean, you want the rim lighting to be nice looking, but as it progresses into the dark, I want to have a subtle transition. So I'm trying to, right where I know I'm going to put the rim lighting, trying to adjust a little bit. I think that's looking pretty good. Better to stop when you think, yes, I kind of got that, and develop other parts of the painting. I like to work in different parts of the painting. That's just the way I work, to bring them up to a level together. Kind of makes sense for me. And just the way I like to do. So now over here, I'm going to dance around with a little bit of darks to maybe suggest the tree is sprouting up from the ground. A few dabs of really dark tone in there. Might be hard, depending on the angle of this, how the light's bouncing off of the wet paint, and if it's a little distracting, I'm sorry, but we'll be doing detail shots later. A couple more things here, just to add some variety. Okay. Now, let's have some fun and work on some rim lighting. All right, make a little room for stuff here. And I'm going to try a little bit of this, I don't know, it's a little over 1/8 inch wide flat. See how that works. Try different brushes. I could use just a small round, but I might do that just for little itty bitty kind of leaf type ideas. So let's just start seeing what happens. See how I like The key here is going to be, because you've got some wet paint you're dealing with here, is don't mush around too much. Try to lay it on there. And I might even actually experiment with the tip of the palette knife to initially put on the slabs of highlight. So right now I'm going to experiment with this, and I have a little load of paint on there and just put it on there. Almost like cut around. And it's going to seem very chunky and geometric, but then I'll go in with a small round and tickle the edges, I call it. So just see what it does. Let some edges drift off. Now I'm picking up a little different highlight for this tree over here. A little more green. And just wiping a little bit on the brush, on my paper towel. Yeah, I'm liking that. And a little continuity, maybe that same green's over here on the tree. Okay, see how we're, and it's not going to take much to let the eye fill in the rest, but picking up the paint so that's on the brush. And you're only going to get like 2 or 3 little movements, and then you got to reload your brush, wipe it off and reload so you don't intermix too much. Because what I'll do with this dry, clean brush is go in and tickle all these edges if I think it needs it. So just, and maybe on that very, starting to meet the sky a little. So you got some earthy greens. Maybe there's a little thing like that. What's nice is if you don't like certain lines you made, you can paint over them with the darks. So it's like you're a constant dialogue between background and foreground. And the important parts and non-important parts. I mean, everything's important in its own way, but it has to be very careful about not being too busy. So let's get some wipe off. Make some a little more I can. Get those. Now this here, I got to make that a little more like a tree. It looks too cut off like so. Just gonna readjust here just a bit and make it come out. So those are things to pay attention to. Sometimes we might be predisposed to making shapes a certain way, and we have to be aware of that and step back every now and then. So I'm picking up some of the original dark color, dark green, and just cut, wipe, put the paint on, pick up more paint. Because I got to wet paint, you know, the light tone there, so I don't want to, see if I can make this work. It's a little better. Minor little adjustment there. Now pick up some highlight for around here. Blend that a bit. All right, we're getting there. Let some of the edges drift off. Now I'm going to switch to a small round brush and do a few more things after I want to get a more colorful green in there, but yet still the same value. So I'll work on that first, and then we'll go to that. So one little stroke, see what it looks like. A little bit lighter. I'm going to just paint all this in and reestablish the tree trunk rather than try to paint around it, because that just ruins the vitality of the paint strokes. You can always put it back in there. And I might leave just hints of the previous color, just to, you know, that's the thing. I'm thinking as I paint. I don't just slap it on there and like dancing around and go, hey, you know, that kind of is the look I'm after, to give the appearance of maybe mini leaves in there and that sort of thing. So maybe some of the trunk gets obliterated, maybe not. And of course I'll fix that a little bit with some dark tones, because the tree just, the leaves don't grow into the ground. So we'll work on that. Get some colors going on. There we go. Maybe I'm going to push just a little darker right up against there. Pop that out. There we go. Now cleaning off my brush just a bit with some terps. All this other time just been wiping it with the paper towel. So I'm going to sit for a minute and take a look at it and decide. Okay. Going to work on that, change it to a round. Kind of a small round. And work on some detail. This will allow me some, got the paint on the brush quite thick, kind of just touching here and there, suggest spaces between leaves. Trying to suggest that the tree comes up out of the ground. So, do a little over here. Good, I like that. Okay, just wiping off the brush. I'm not putting it in terps. I think if you put it in terps too much, then you're going to potentially end up with running paint. So, try to, no, just certain areas maybe. And of course, these trees are further back. You're not going to see the detail of the leaves that you see in the foreground, so I'm not going to go too much, but just some key, a little stronger, like rather than just a continuous tone of a rim light. Maybe certain parts of that rim lighting is brighter than other parts on the same tree, just to give a little variety. Not too much on the edges, so I don't want to attract the eye over there too much. Just enough to be interesting. And got some, let's get some leaves dancing here. Just a bit. I keep reloading. I get a couple passes with the paint and then I have to reload, put more paint on. And dipping back into the dark background color, cut back in around that. So constant pull, and I think I'm liking that quite a bit. So this is a helpful exercise in bringing home, you know, maybe I would not have kept this plein air painting originally, but I figured, hey, you know, what the heck, it's try to improve upon it, see what happens. And right now I'm making that kind of straight, but then I'll go back in a little lighter paint, dance up the edges so it's not too strong. There we go. Now, also when I bought the plastic palette knives, because I kind of expected that they might be, yeah, they're all right, but I think over time they might get pitted, and so, you know, this is what I've been using for this. Now I'm going to experiment, went out and got some flexible whoops, metal ones. And I'll peel this. Well, that's going to be fun. I guess I'll use the other side. So, just going to see. Sometimes you don't get a lot of spring. Like if this was just, this is one reason why, yes, the artist ones that you can buy at Dick Blick or whatever are going to be better because they're designed. But if this was just 3/4 inch longer, you'd have some nice spring. But I'm still going to try it out. See what happens. And I'm not going to highlight this whole thing. It's going to be in here and drift off in terms of intensity of color. And that's the plan. Just try to suggest. I'm going to mix up some brighter green with some cad yellow and the ultramarine. Really get some. Yes, I can just take this and do the same thing, but hey, I want to play around and learn. So now I'm adding some extra, because I can see that I don't want the same green as that, and I'm adding a touch of yellow ochre to temper that cad yellow in the mixture. And now I'm going to experiment with just a touch of white. Got to be careful with white, but because I kind of want a earthy, bright yellow. So the white will help achieve that. Now let's see what I get here. See how the focal point's going right there? It's nice. Now I'm actually going to take a little bit of the cad yellow with the putty knife here, mix it into the mixture I was just using, and see what happens. I mean, I have obviously an educated idea, but the control you have with these putty knives is can be a little challenging. Okay. I just don't want to be more powerful than what's on that tree. Maybe I dance some of this. I think that's looking pretty good. Okay, now I'm going to introduce the smaller palette knife, the actual painter's palette knife, and start adjusting some of this so it doesn't look too mechanical. Okay, liking that a lot. I'm actually going to take some white with just the cad yellow, and all these mixtures that, my palette, I have just all these patches of color to go back and forth and mix. So good. Maybe a little, whoops, suggestion. And this previous layer is dry enough. It's a little wet, but sometimes using a thicker paint, I actually kind of paused and came back to this the next day because I had to go to work, but so a little bit of it tacked up. And so see how this nice, now I'm going to get some, a nice set off. Now I'm just going to start suggesting. I think what I'm going to do is try to get some suggestion of the curvature of the hill. And my instinct, because I'm left-handed, is want to do this, but then I don't want to lead the eye to nowhere. So I'm going to actually start adjusting some of these to suggest that. And, this is how the painting grows. Yeah, before I just consider the previous layer a base layer now, because I was thinking of the original of what I saw, but now I'm thinking more like, how can I make this an interesting painting that's visually pleasing with the composition and the application of paint. So, and I tend to experiment more like this with my landscapes. And the hope is, this is why I like to do a lot of different subjects, is I want to incorporate some of this idea of working with the palette knife, obviously, with my urbans. I think it'd be great for, you know, say, pavement and textures on bricks. And so I introduce that a little bit here and there in my urbans, but I want to do more. I want to have very active paint surface and yet still be realism. That I think, you know, the more I look at videos on YouTube or artwork and books and paintings that grab my attention, that's what attracts my attention. I'm like, so what can paint do? You know, let's find out. So kind of getting there. And to balance that out, I'm going to get some little darker, just really not too crazy. It's not a plowed field, but I want to accentuate, try to subtly that movement to converge and see how far I can take it here. Trying to avoid a look of lines in the painting, obviously. And they obviously may look like lines in the beginning, but want to try to mix that paint in a way, move it around. And if you don't like it, you know, you can scrape down with the palette knife and get rid of some of those ridges and stuff, let it dry, and create a new pathway. That's the beauty of this. So just, I'm liking that. I'm just going to do a little more over here, some darks. See how far I can push it. Kind of maybe accentuate one strong area of dark to really push it over there, push the eye over. So, and I feel this needs a little. I'm going to push. Okay. Now I think I'm almost done with this for the lesson here. And just get a few more strong highlights. I like that, nice and subtle. Get some kind of color over here in this corner just a bit. A little bright there. Don't want the eye going there too much. Tone that down. And this is kind of dead, so I want to activate that a little bit. That I think I will call good for the field, and we're near completion enough that once I think I'm done, I'll let it sit and contemplate anymore, but I like it a lot so far. Okay, now to finish this up a bit, I'm going to do just a little flicks of paint to suggest little wildflowers, and I think there was some Indian paintbrush out in the field and all that kind of cool stuff. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do here. Create some fields of that, and I could do it with a little palette knife and stuff, but I'm just going to use a small brush. I don't need it. I don't need a lot of it, I don't think. So do some near the focal point. I'm actually going to use, actually that needs to, there we go. All right. Go straight for the white, because it's going to mix a little bit with whatever's there. Obviously, many ways you could do this, but maybe there's some Queen Anne's lace. Just add a little more interest to the field. And I'm turning the brush because I still have paint on it, and to get different shades of the white, because it's intermixing with the previous layers of what's there. So it adds, you can keep pushing this. Why not use it rather than just, use your judgment. If you think something's a little too bright, just go back over it a little bit to push it into the wet paint that's below. So just some hints. Now I'm going to get a little red and see if I can, which is going to be nice with the green, see if I can just get some little flecks of that for the Indian paintbrush that I saw. And the video probably won't pick up these subtle tones, but it's looking nice and bright. I'm putting a little more red in there so it pops here and there. The key is to try to make it random. I think sometimes as humans we want to just get this mechanical thing going on all the time, and that's can be dangerous. Committing by pushing the brush a little hard to get that paint down, and I think I like that. Oh, I want to experiment. See if I can get a few. Nah, I don't like that. Temptation is there to put some tree trunks in the background, and I just am not gonna risk it. I don't think it really needs it. Your mind maybe says it does, but there is one thing there that needs to, this line's a little too straight, so take off the bottom of it, mix it into the paint that's underneath. Try to, and now take that, a new rim lighting, and go over this way. So those are things to kind of analyze when you're done near the end. Well, I think that's it for me. The sky, in relation to everything else, I like it a lot. I think it's got some really nice features, and I'm gonna take the camera off, tripod, do some close-ups. See if we can get some of that detail to show you, and get this ready so that the light's not bouncing off it too much. Okay, let me get the camera off. Okay, here it is. I'm not sure how the light's shining on it, but really try to hold it still. Happy with it. So this is what I'm going to do with some of my still life paintings I did earlier. Still life, my plein air work that I did in the field earlier. I'm going to go through and do some more, and really like how this turned out. I'm going to try to see if this picks up the palette knife detail. Try to slowly pan around here. Just a suggestion of detail. So that's it. Thank you for watching the video, and if you're a subscriber, thank you very much, and for all your comments. And I invite other comments. I do look at them and reply to them pretty quickly. And if you're not a subscriber, I invite you to do so and learn some more about painting. Thanks for watching. Bye.